What up, guys? Welcome back to another YouTube video, and today we're going to be breaking down Chapter 8 of my brand new book, The Simplicity and Complexity of Life. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Chapter 8, Worldly Evil. There will simply always be evil and wrongdoing in the world. It is a part of nature, just as is death. There is no need to go running into its arms, but when it purposely or accidentally presents itself, face it head on. We should not turn our back to it and play as though it doesn't exist, because the truth is, it is just as real as you or I. So what I kind of mean by this is that a lot of people in this life, we see evil or we see wrongdoing and we try and just push it to the side and, pretend that it doesn't exist. And I believe we shouldn't, fixate on, the things that are going wrong in our life or the evil in the world, because a lot of times that draws it to us or makes us suffer, more than necessary. But also, when we see a problem, we face it. We don't act as though it doesn't exist. If we see someone that's getting hurt or getting abused, we don't, turn a blind eye to it. We go and we help them the best we can. If, we see injustice, we go and we try and make it right. And that is a big part of being a Stoic, is standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, and putting your hand out and reaching out to those that need help and that, can't always get it, and being, a positive influence in your community and to those around you. As Miyamoto Musashi, the samurai warrior and author of the Book of the Five Rings, once wrote, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." I love this quote. What he kind of means is it's better to be always ready and to have this warrior fighter mindset that you can always, have at hand and you can always approach the world with. But it's also nice to, live in a world where you never have to use it. We should, have that mindset of a warrior and, be able to protect ourselves and protect others and protect the people we care about. But also, try and live a life of peace and one of tranquility, and one that we don't stir the pot purposely, or one where we, live, respectfully with others. It's important to be ready for whatever obstacles or opponents life presents you, and these may come in many different forms, such as a family member or friend turned enemy or sour, maybe a rude coworker, or a sickness that falls upon you, or something as simple as a disagreement with a passerby. Whatever it may be, it should be approached with grace and a clear view. Evil is something we will all run into. Most of us run into it daily and don't even know it. Take a look at the world and yourself for proof. Most times, evil will look us straight in the face and smile right at us, and we don't even realize that it's just us looking in the mirror. And this is not to be cynical, because there is plenty of good and beauty in the world, and people as well, but there is a lot of evil and wrongdoing in the world, and we all have a dark side to us. But most of us try and act as though we are all virtuous and good, or we simply don't care because it's not right in front of us, or the absolute worst of all, the ones who commit these atrocities of evil create excuses and believe their own fallacies so strongly that they believe what they are doing is right, and what they are so persistent and persuasive with it that it infects the minds of the uneducated. So there's a lot to unpack right there. First of all, talking about how evil is something we will all run into. It's something we all run into. We see it on a daily basis, even if it's on the news, on social media. We hear about war, we hear about death, we hear about senseless killings, we hear about crime. We all will run into evil on a daily basis, even if it's not physically right in front of us. And also, with the fact that it's not physically right in front of us, doesn't mean that we just turn a blind eye to it or pretend that it doesn't exist. Kind of like I was saying earlier, it's still our duty as human beings, and if we are trying to live a life of a stoic, to stand up against that injustice and for the people that are affected by it and be like, hey, this is not right. This needs to stop. This needs to change. And have a little bit of, humility for others, and, look at where your heart is and where your morals stand, and question what you're being told and what you're being shown, and try and figure out where you stand on that side of history. Are you going to be the one that, allows this injustice to continue, or are you going to stand up and say, hey, this needs to stop? And that's a question I think we all have to ask ourselves a little more, especially in the modern day climate of the world we find ourselves living in. And then also that we all have a evil dark side to us, and I'm going to touch on this a little later in this chapter, but we all do things every day that we, know we probably shouldn't, or that might be a little dark or a little dirty, or we might play an underhanded move. And I think we should never go purposely out and try and do someone dirty. But we're all, let's be honest, we're all playing the game of life here, and we're all trying to just get ahead. And sometimes, you got to give yourself that edge by, playing a little dirty, or, working the system in your favor. And I mean, that comes into a, situation basis. You can't put a blanket statement over all of that. But, really looking where your morals stand and what you think is morally right and wrong, depending on each situation you find yourself in. But we all have a dark side to ourselves, a little narcissistic side to ourselves. And it's okay to take advantage of that sometimes within ourselves to give ourselves that edge. But we also have to address it if it gets too out of control. Back to where I was at, talking about how the worst is when people that are doing these atrocities convince the uneducated that their crimes or their atrocities that they're committing are just, or persuade them and inflict their minds with, just rhetoric that is simply wrong, or just simply straight bullshit. And you look at this throughout mass genocides all throughout history. At the time, they were all justified by diminishing the status and value of the victims, such as saying, they're not humans, they're rats, talking about Jews in Nazi Germany, or they're only 3/5 of a man, talking about slaves in America, or they're not humans, they're savages, talking about Native Americans. Or, more recently, they're not a child, they're a fetus, talking about infants in the womb. And these are the same tactics used today in modern day genocides and human-inflicted atrocities all around the world. Another one that I didn't mention here, but is, one that we see a lot nowadays, I think we need to address more, is they're terrorists, or they're the enemy. Well, really, are they? We're the ones that are going in, invading their land, taking shit from them and their people. Really question your government, because I'm telling you right now, the U.S. government is not the good guy. The U.S. government does a lot of fucked up shit, and we have to question them, and a lot of us don't. They throw up that smoke screen. Donald Trump, not even just the Trump administration. They've been doing this for years, for decades they've been doing this, They throw up this smoke screen, they throw up the green Wizard of Oz curtain, don't look behind here, we don't want you to see the bullshit we're doing behind the scenes. We're only show you us, doing the good shit and pretending like we're the hero, and we're only going to write the good parts of history, but all the fucked up shit we do, all, the taking and the pillaging of these people, we're not going to tell you about that. Most of us, though, find it easier to pretend these types of things don't happen just because they don't happen to us. We tend to create our own little perfect world of self-deception. And I think a lot of us, I wouldn't say all of us, but a lot of people, they think that the U.S. is the good guy, and they think that, oh, I live in America, everything's fine, everything's going to turn out fine. Yeah, sure. But there's a lot of fucked up shit that still happens, a lot of messed up stuff that still happens, and we have to, stand up against injustice, like I said earlier. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you can also commit injustice by doing nothing. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time, one of my favorite Marcus Aurelius quotes, and I think it's such a simple quote, but it's such a powerful quote, and something that I think more of us need to live with. And I think it's so true. You can also commit injustice by doing nothing. Let's just throw out a situation. Let's say you see someone kicking a dog, just kicking a dog on the side of the road. Are you going to just let that person, kick that dog and kill that dog? No, you're going to stand up and you're going to say something, because you know it's wrong. That dog didn't do anything. It's not okay to abuse an animal like that. And it's funny, nowadays we see a lot more people seem to have compassion for animals than they do actually other human beings. And I think that's something that's so interesting, and it's sad to see. Some situations that come to mind are the killing of Renee Good and Alex Peretti. Those were really, recent killings here in America, with the whole ICE raids that were going on in Minneapolis, and you saw just the horrible things people were saying online about them, and just people not having any, compassion or humility for people. Like, those are people that had families, that had lives, but to people on social media and online, and, political figures saying that it was just that those people died, or no, not at all. They are people just like you and me, and they deserve respect. They do not deserve to be gunned down and executed in the street. And it's just a tragic world we're living in, where people are so heavily tied to their political opinions that they think just because someone stands on the opposite side of the aisle from them, they deserve to die. It's insane. But it's our responsibility to, stand up against injustice. And if you let injustice, happen in front of you and you don't do anything, that's also, you doing and committing injustice. Turning a blind eye, it's not only a disservice to the victims of evil, but also a disservice to yourself. Evil, it is something that is inescapable, something that has been around since the beginning of time, and something that must exist in a sense. So we must know how to identify it and how to live with it in ourselves and others, and how to overcome it. There is an inner evil and narcissistic bad side to all of us. Knowing how to tap into this side is important as well, because in the realm of creativity and business, it can give us an edge over others. Many of times, the most creative people are willing to tap into this side of them for the sake of their art. A lot of times, the art acting as a reflection of them and society, drawing people to the mirror they have presented. In a world of business and power, this can give you the edge by making bold moves that set you apart from the rest. Showing your boldness can attract the right people and repel the bad ones. But be careful, because it can have the opposite effect as well. So what I kind of am talking about here, and 3 examples I really like, are Kendrick Lamar, Conor McGregor, and Kobe Bryant. I think are all 3 excellent examples of having this little narcissistic almost edge to you that really sets you apart and makes you shine and makes you so successful. Kendrick Lamar always, not to be, with the puns, but always has seemed like a quite humble guy that came from humble beginnings. But he, especially with his beef with Drake, he really let that little narcissistic side out, and it brought him so much success in that beef. I think it really, gave his career that second boost, because Mr. Morale, that did great, but that album, wasn't, the most commercially successful album. but then he came back with, Not Like Us, the beef with Drake, GNX, performing at the Super Bowl, headlining all these shows, biggest selling rap tour of all time. So I think him being able to tap into that really, really, set him apart and really revitalized his career. Conor McGregor, another example. Him being able to just talk his shit and be slick with his words really made him stand out and really made him this massive draw in MMA. And he's been away from MMA for the last almost 5 years, but his return is still something that is so wanted, and people still talk about him. And, it's gotten him into a little bit of trouble, over the last few years, but him just having this, bravado, this bravado about him, it really set him apart and made him so charismatic and so interesting and just such a badass person. And then finally Kobe Bryant, him, in his press conferences, the iconic press conference where they're asking him if he's happy, and then he goes, no, because the job's not done yet, almost a little cocky or, cynical or condescending almost, but he's, being honest with the reporter. He's, being like, hey, I still have to finish the job. I still have more that I'm hungry for to complete, that's great. I won the game tonight, but the job's not done, having that edge to you that, makes you stand out, and him just being hungry, always, wanting the ball, going out and being the person that wants to score, wants to shoot, really gave him that edge. Even, mentally, you would see the way he would look at the other team's players on the court, and you could see it in his eyes. He just knew he was something different than the rest of them, and that really made him shine. And that just that dedication and that, thinking you're the best before anyone else can see it, but then putting in that work to back it up is something that is so valuable. And if you have it, use it. Talking about using it, using this darker side can lead to great success and acclaim when used right, or great disdain and animosity. There's no question that all throughout history we have been so drawn to the bad guys, from real life to fiction, such as Napoleon, Jeffrey Dahmer, Pablo Escobar, or in fiction such as Scarface, Walter White, and Dexter Morgan. Because there's something intriguing about their power. We see a piece of ourselves in them. We are so intrigued by where it comes from. We fascinate as to what it might be like to be them. But the truth is, there is very little separating them from us. The difference is they just don't care or have control over it. They let that internalized dark side out in excessive amounts. The morality behind their actions comes secondary. So a lot of those examples, from fiction or from real life, we're intrigued by them because of all the crazy things they do, a lot of times illegal things they do, but we're intrigued by that because we imagine putting ourselves in their shoes, if that makes sense. We see, pieces and bits of them that we see in ourselves or that we want to see in ourselves. We live vicariously through them, and we fantasize as to what it might be like to be them. And to be honest, there's very little separating them from us. Like I said, the part that is that they just don't give a fuck. They don't care. They do whatever the fuck they want, and that's what separates them from the rest of it, everybody else. And a lot of times it ends up, in the end, Scarface at the end, Tony Montana, he dies at the end, Pablo Escobar, he dies, Walter White, he dies, Dexter, he dies, gets brought back a million times, but he dies, so a lot of times it ends up leading to their downfall, but it's just interesting, how that dynamic works and how intrigued we are by these people, but they're just people at the end of the day. If they're real life or fictional, they're characters, they're people, but there's not much that separates us from them, and we could easily become them. I don't want to say easily, but we can become them, and the difference is they just don't give a fuck. They do whatever the fuck they want, and it plays out for them, successfully at the start, but a lot of times it ends up engulfing them at the end. In the modern day world, we have to let it out only at the appropriate times and places. We have to become acclimated to keeping it on a leash for better or for worse. And if we don't let it off the leash, most times it breaks loose, causing damage to the innocent. Or on the other hand, if you let it off the leash all the time, it can end up just making your life harder for you, making yourself stand out, and not in a good way. So what I kind of mean by this is, Robert Greene's talked about this kind of in some of his works about how we all have, this narcissistic, kind of egoistic side to us, and we have to let it out. It's like, he described it like a dog on a leash. You gotta take it outside to fucking shit and piss. If not, you keep it stored up, it's gonna shit everywhere. You have to let it out. And like I say in here, sometimes we let it out online in a comment section somewhere. Sometimes we let it out in traffic, in road rage incidents. Sometimes it'll accidentally attack the innocent people, like I kind of said in here. It might be someone, just says a little thing at work, and then we flip out at them, or maybe it's a friend or a family member. So knowing the appropriate places to let that out, and who and when and where to show that, side to, and get that, darker side out, because we all have it, and we all have those thoughts, and we gotta be fucking honest about it. Who's to say when and where is the right time and place to let this side out? But it is true that when and where you let the side out does have a big impact, so be cautious as to where and whom you present your dark side to. And this is simply just the internalized evil we have control over. The evil that's in this world is so indescribable. Human suffering, heartache, and pain and tribulation is part of the human experience. Evil and what it is has been a deep-rooted question. Friedrich Nietzsche thought that the idea of evil, in a sense, was something we created by making a label. More so, we as humans, the ones that dictate what is evil and what is not. He believed that naturally in society, powerful people would rise to the top, and they would become the ones who set the moral standards as being what they are. Therefore, people underneath them constantly will have to strive to meet those moral standards set by those above them, and in turn will grow resentment and their own moral judgments of those above them. And we see this, and I go talk about later here. This is Friedrich Nietzsche's The Master-Slave, morality. And the master up top, the politicians, the world leaders, the kings, the queens, the impactors, the cultural movers of the world, the people behind the curtain, behind the smoke screen. Those are the ones that, have set the precedent for what is morally right. Our priests, our, leaders in the world, our presidents, our, dictators, our kings, our queens. Those are the people that have dictated morality and what is right and wrong. And a lot of the times, the people beneath them, the slaves, the poor, the working class, they end up resenting them, and rightfully so sometimes, end up resenting them and end up creating their own morals. And oftentimes it's the exact opposite of them. So the people up top are, their morals are looking down upon the people below them, because the people below them are poor. They're weak, they're dumb, they're uneducated, they're all these things that are morally wrong to the person above them. And then the people at the bottom, the slaves, scowl up at the master and think that what is morally right is not being rich, that is not, having immense power and ruling over others and being greedy. And I can see it, I think it's important for, at least I see it from that middle view. And I think it's important we see more in that middle view as not, being, left versus right or poor versus wealthy. We should really sit in that middle view. Because as we know today, that working class, that middle class in America is shrinking more and more. It's becoming a lot harder to live. And I think we have to have real conversations here that we can have millionaires and billionaires in this world. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, but comes with a big but we should not have people that are working, that are starving, that cannot pay their rent, that cannot put food on the table for them and their families. If you're working 40 hours a week, no matter pretty much whatever the hell you're doing, you should be able to pay your rent and have somewhere to live and be able to put food on your table and, pay the bills you got to pay. Maybe you don't take a vacation every year, but you should be able to survive, and we're seeing that gap become smaller and smaller. And I think we, have to have that conversation. The rich are not evil. I'm not saying that, well, all right, let me preface, there are some that are a little fucking weird. Not to point any fingers, but being rich doesn't automatically make you evil. And there's a lot of great millionaires, even billionaires out there that do a lot of great humanitarian work and, give back a lot to their communities and the places they come from. But we should not have people starving. We should not, have people that are working 40 plus hours a week starving, that cannot pay their rent, that are worrying about, their bills being paid on time. I mean, that, we need to make sure everyone's taken care of in this world. And that kind of comes back to having that, humility and, having compassion for one another as human beings. Yet, what do we do when we are faced with things that are widely recognized around the world as simply just evil, firsthand or not, such as murder, stealing, cheating, and more? Well, with that, there is no simple answer, or more so, there is no answer simply. The best we can do is look at where our perspective is in the situation. Are we the victim? Are we the wrongdoer? Or are we the hero, or maybe just an onlooker? Assess what power you have and how you can get more of it, and what you can do with it. And lastly, you can choose to listen to or not to the morality of what is socially acceptable in society. But there is simply no way to avoid evil or wrongdoers, or doing evil, or doing wrong yourself. There are only two things we have control over, is how we react to evil and if we let evil overtake us. I think, obviously, morality is a man-made concept, and I talk about this more later on in chapter 10 in this book on morality. But morality is a man-made concept, but morality is very, subjective on what is right and wrong, and I think we should constantly be testing our morality and what we think is right and wrong and why we think it's wrong. But there are some things, that are quite universally around the world seen as wrong, murdering, stealing, cheating, things of that nature. There's some others, I'm sure you can think of, but when we're faced with things like that, there's no simple answer to how we should go about them, but we have to, no matter what situation we find ourselves in, especially if it's a negative one, we have to look at our perspective. Are we the victim? Are we the hero? Can we be the hero? Are we an onlooker? Are we, are we the person that's doing the wrong to them maybe? We got to take a step back and always look at the bigger picture and assess what power we have and what we can do with it. And if we're the wrongdoer, how do we make it right? Or if we're, in a position where we can be a hero, is that, our duty, and is that, something that we're made to do? Is that something we're obligated to do? Or are we the victim? And if we are the victim, are we just going to let ourselves be the victim, or are we going to stand up against it, or if we're an onlooker, are we, just going to let it, slip by, or are we going to step up and be that hero? So assessing your position in it and what you can do about it. Within learning, there will always be worldly evil. Arises the questioning of religion. If there is a God, isn't he supposed to be all good and all powerful? So why is there evil in the world? Well, this gives us validation to the idea of absurdism, because there is simply no proof of God being all good and all powerful if it is the case that he does exist. If there is a God, he does not sound all good or all powerful. There is simply no evidence of it, and there will not be, because religion in itself has evil rooted into it. To a degree, so many parts of religion are used by people to control others and limit society's possibilities of free will, and justify spreading their hate or evil through actions, even though the principles of most religions are based off of is acceptance and love. So evil is rooted in all pretty much religions to some degree, and they can call that, sin, or, free will taking place, whatever you want to call it. But evil is something that exists in man to an extent, and evil, again, and morality are all subjective. But evil, we see a lot of evil in religion. You see, priests, touching, clergy boys and, molesting children, and then they get relocated, or, just terrible things, or, Christians hating on gay people and, telling gay people they're going to burn in hell and all this crazy shit. I mean, that doesn't sound quite like love to me. And there's the old expression, there's no love quite like Christian hate. And we see a lot of that now, especially on social media, especially with the political climate. I think it gives people a lot more comfortability to be openly hateful towards others. And I think that is sad to see. This shows that there is no evidence of God being all good or all powerful, when even the people that follow him do evil and unjustly deeds. So, with this conclusion, leaves us with nothing but validation for absurdism. We should not spend too much time trying to meet the moral standards of religion and the hypocrisy rooted within them, but instead find our own moral standards through self-discovery and searching for our own answers of what true good and evil are, by free thinking and doing what matters to us, and helping the people of this world, being of service to others. Yet there will always be assholes, killers, and wrongdoers in the world, but just remember, they come from the same places you do, and in the end will end up just like you. I think, kind of ending that off, I think that's such an important thing, is we come up with our own morals and our own standards instead of just inheriting them from our priests, our teachers, from mom and dad. Say, why do I believe this? Do I believe it because this person told me? Well, is that really wrong? Or what's wrong about that? Why does that make me feel that way? Why do I think this is right? Why do I think this is wrong? Ask yourself these bigger questions, because not enough of us out here in the world do. And once we do, I think the world will be a lot better place and a lot more of an educated place. And I think it's really important that we as humans come up with our morals. And I know I definitely have, and I've definitely gone on a journey with my own morals, especially a lot over the past 2 years. I feel like I always had a pretty good ground basis on my own morals and why I believe the things I believe, but even more so over the last 2 to 3 years, I've really more so tuned in on my morals and changed some of my moral beliefs and things like that, and restructured some of them to be a little bit more fitting for the times I find myself in. And if you believe something, you know, one of the most freeing things and one of the most, you know, humble things you can do is to admit, hey, I was wrong about this, and I change it. You know, you can't always be stuck to your opinions, and if, you know, you can admit that, oh, I was wrong with this and change it, that shows a lot of humility and that shows a lot of strength, and I think that's something to be really respected. If you can see that, hey, I believed this in the past, but I changed my mind, I think this now, or I supported this, but it didn't quite turn out to be what I thought it was, and I'm changing my decision now on that because I see that now it's causing hurt or injustice or pain to others. And you stand up against that, I think that's something that can be respected. But yeah, making sure that we all choose our morality instead of inheriting it and ask ourselves, constantly question our morals and beliefs. Well, till next time, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Tell me your guys' thoughts on morality and worldly evil. Where do you think evil comes from? What do you think evil is? Where do you think evil lies and plays into your own day-to-day life? Till next time, make sure you guys pick up a copy of my brand new book, The Simplicity and Complexity of Life, available on Amazon.com. Link is going to be down in the description below. Until next time, peace out.